So when I was in junior high school, I wanted to be a cheerleader. All the cool kids were doing it, and it seemed totally compelling at the time. So I approached my mother with this idea and said to her, "Hey, I want to try for the cheerleading squad. What do you think?" She immediately stopped me in my tracks and said, "Hey, wait a second. You shouldn't be standing on the sidelines cheering for someone else. You should be in the game." So I'm in the game now. I'm the co-founder and co-director of a nonprofit called REVERB, as Anna mentioned. And what REVERB does is green musicians tours and also educate their fans at shows about environmental issues, both local and national. After growing up in Wells, Maine and attending Tufts University, I went to this wacky and wonderful graduate school program called the Audubon Expedition Institute, or AEI for short. On AEI, I lived out of a bus and traveled with other students and professors studying environmental issues, cultural issues, and also spent a ton of time in the backcountry. It was on one of these backcountry expeditions in the Utah wilderness where I was on a solo. I was out alone for 24 hours, and I really confirmed and connected to the natural world in a very different way. It was through that connection that I pledged myself to work on behalf of the environment. Shortly after my time at AEI, I went to San Francisco and started work with an organization called the Rainforest Action Network. And RAN was an organization that was a very lefty, activist, rabble-rousing group, and I was an anti-oil campaigner there. What I was doing was working on behalf of an indigenous community in Colombia, the Uwa people, and helping them to protect their ancestral homeland from an oil project. This was David and Goliath work. It was massive, it was daunting. I felt like I was thrown to the wolves. It was an intense time. It was also during that time in San Francisco when I was connected with a larger activist community there and practiced civil disobedience. I'm not sure if you know what that means necessarily, but it often means you're risking arrest. And so I was arrested 3 times over the course of my time in San Francisco. And during the last of my 3 arrests, I was at the World Trade Organization meetings in Seattle in 1999, and I was booked and put in jail and made my one call. You actually do get that one call. And so pick up the phone, call my folks back here in Maine, and my mom answers and says hello, and this automated kind of message kicks in saying, "You have received a collect call from the Kings County Jail." And I hear my mother go, "Richard, it's for you." My dad was an attorney, and she thought it was one of his clients in trouble, of course. And I say, no, Mom, it's me, it's Lauren, I'm in jail. And I could literally hear her hand hit her head, and she goes, "Oh, Jesus Christ." So I was in the game then. And after my time in San Francisco, I moved to New York City and began work with Partnerships for Parks. And I was doing community organizing around parks, gardens, and green spaces in Brooklyn. And although I loved the community organizing component of what I was doing, I spent a lot of time behind my desk. I was punching in and punching out. It was a 9-to-5 job, and I didn't feel in the action anymore. And so I was had this feeling of discontent, of looking at this David and Goliath work that I had just done and this kind of more basic work I was doing in Brooklyn, and there was a dissonance there. And so what does any young woman do? I journaled. That wasn't something I normally do. But I started writing every day, and I called them the crisis papers. They were filled with angst and ideas, and it was kind of ridiculous. But what I was trying to do was figure out who I was. Where did I want to be on the environmental continuum in terms of my work? What could I offer to the world? What was my passion? And so in reflecting on this, I was thinking back to my time in San Francisco, where I'd be sitting at meetings and conferences, and there'd be a bunch of hippies in the room, myself included, all nodding at each other. Yes, that's a great idea. This is wonderful. And it was preaching. We were preaching to the choir constantly, again and again, and we weren't connecting with average, everyday citizens. And I also had encountered so many incredible nonprofits during my time there that I just felt like I wanted to shine a light on what they were doing and help them get the word out. And so simultaneously, I was living with my boyfriend at the time, my now husband, Adam Gardner, who's in a rock band called Guster. And he was lamenting the fact that he was in his diesel-powered tour bus and leaving behind this plume of plastic bottles every night, and also just playing at these venues where the electricity was being chewed through every night. So he was feeling this real guilt about his own environmental footprint. And so it was during this very mundane moment, it wasn't washing my hair in the shower, but it was washing dishes at the sink, where the idea of REVERB finally gelled. It was really about mashing our two worlds together and taking what I knew about environmentalism and what he knew about the music industry and putting them together. It was about taking the opportunity to connect with thousands of fans at every show and also being able to connect those nonprofits that desperately wanted to talk to your average everyday citizen. So that's when the idea of REVERB really became concrete. We began sharing ideas with our friends and family about this new concept of ours that we were very excited about, and shortly thereafter, Adam's sister sent us this flyer from Bonnie Raitt's Green Highway. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Bonnie Raitt, but she's this iconic blues guitarist, singer-songwriter, and activist in her own right. She's really incredible. And she had this activation out on her tours. It was tents, banners, flags, biodiesel-powered buses, sustainable technologies. It was amazing. And so after hearing that, I knew what I needed to do. I needed to give a call to Bonnie Raitt and her manager and find out more about this. And just to give you some context here, that would be like finding out that you have this idea that you're excited about and finding out that John Mayer or Gwen Stefani is doing something that you're just dying to do and that you need to call them. So I was terrified, absolutely terrified, paralyzed. I was having all of those questions of self-doubt that I think we often get of the who am I? I'm just a girl from small town Maine. I'm just getting started. These guys are varsity, and I'm not even on the playing field. So it was kind of sitting with those feelings for a very long time when I ultimately had this conversation with my mother, who's here today. And she repeated one of her refrains, which was, "What's the worst that can happen? The worst they're going to say is no, and you're right back where you started." She doesn't actually have that accent, but that is what she said. And it's always been one of those things that sticks in my head. It's true, you're right back where you started, nothing lost. And so that was the nudge that I needed to pick up the phone. And so I picked up the phone, my hand was shaking, kind of like it is now, and my heart was beating a million miles an hour. And I called Bonnie Raitt's manager, Kathy Kane, and told her who I was and what I had been doing and what my boyfriend was doing in the music industry, and shared our idea. And she stopped and said, "That's terrific. We did this Green Highway thing. We've got all this gear in storage. You can use it. When are you coming to Los Angeles? Let's talk. I'll mentor you through all of this. I'll help you get a foothold in the industry." And I hung up the phone. I was floored, shocked. I was elated and practically levitating, honestly. I couldn't believe that she had said yes, that she had responded to our idea and was so welcoming and open. And then I was also simultaneously a bit frustrated with myself for not having said yes to myself, to picking up that phone and to taking that action sooner. So it was a learning experience there. And so after we flew out to Los Angeles and met with her and understood that this was real, the next step for me was to quit my job, which was, again, a daunting leap because I didn't have a lot of money in the bank. I had a lot of grad school debt. But after Adam, my boyfriend, now husband, and I spoke, we decided that we'd give this REVERB idea a year. If it had legs and if it kind of stuck, great. And if it didn't, I'd go back to a 9-to-5 job. So I quit my job, gave notice, and off I went. I borrowed the Guster 15-passenger van, which we still drive today, and then I also packed it full of the Bonnie Raitt Green Highway gear. I coerced a couple of friends into coming with me and helping out on a tour, but we needed to figure out who we were going to use as our guinea pig. So Adam went off into the music industry and connected with folks that he has relationships with, and the Barenaked Ladies and Alanis Morissette were heading out on a tour, and they said yes to this crazy idea that come along on our tour. We like this REVERB thing. And so I got in the van with my friends, and we then set up our eco-villages at 8 in the morning and did our environmental outreach at all the shows. And we then packed up our gear at night at 11 p.m., put it back in the van, hopped on the road, and traveled another 300-plus miles to the next venue. We did that again and again and again over the course of the tour, zigzagging our way across the country. It was all details and logistics, and it was really intense. But the beautiful feeling about that was that REVERB had finally become real. It was alive in many ways. And so here we are 10 years later, and REVERB's greened 151 tours. We've connected with over 3,000 nonprofit partners. We've connected also with about 18 million fans over the course of the past 10 years. So it's been a wild ride. And we've also been blessed enough to work with incredible artists who are activists in their own right, Folks like Maroon 5, Jack Johnson, John Mayer, Jason Mraz, Drake, Wiz Khalifa, yeah, Dave Matthews Band, and Fun, to name a few. And so now we're at a point in our evolution as an organization where we're needing to get to that place of discomfort again and look at how we can evolve and innovate. Because we've encountered something that we call in our organization green fatigue. I hope you don't have it now. But the idea is that when people start talking about carbon offsets, climate change, sustainability, and using all of the jargon that comes with a lot of environmental work, that people just shut down, they glaze over. And so we know that our work and the work of the environmental community as a whole really is to connect with folks, connect with their hearts, find out how environmentalism can become meaningful in their own lives so that we can create change. So we're excited to take those next steps along the path over the next 10 years and beyond. So the reality is I took some chances when I was younger, and thankfully, luckily, they've become something good and meaningful. But what I've learned over the evolution of REVERB, through the evolution of REVERB, and through some nudging from my mom, is that we all really need to say yes sometimes. We need to say yes more. Because it's so easy to go to that place of self-doubt, of the who am I? I'm not an expert. I don't have my ducks in a row. I'm not ready. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm too stuck. Whatever those questions are. And what we need to do is we need to listen to that idea that keeps sticking in your brain, and you need to listen to that feeling that keeps percolating up and bubbling up again and again. And listen to that feeling of discontent and discomfort, and instead of it letting it debilitate you, let it drive your ideas forward. Use it as a fuel. There's so many things that are of issue out there today, so many problems that need to be solved. And I know each and every one of you have these spectacular ideas in your head. So take a look around you. Look at your community. Find those great thinkers that are around you. Find the people in your life that can nudge you along on that path. And then solve some problems. So identify a problem and find a solution. Because the reality is we're all a little afraid sometimes. We're all a lot afraid sometimes. But you never want to be left questioning what might have been, and you never want to be left feeling like you could have, but you didn't. So just say yes. Thank you.